the story of a young man named Naeem.
Yes.
In his struggle to kind of find the balance in his life with all of the things that are happening around him.
What inspired you to write this book, and why was it important that you did it in Somalia, for example?
I think what inspired me first to write this book is because...
So obviously there's a lot of mahmais in here.
Yes.
In the book. There's a lot of sayings. Somali especially, we transfer information through metaphors.
Yes.
And storytelling and giving people perspective. What was your favorite mahmai in the book?
Yes.
And what's your favorite mahmai in general? How does it actually feel to have your book in your hand?
Honestly, it feels surreal. I think when you have an idea and then the idea finally comes to fruition, it is a very much like you're like, I actually got to the top of the hill.
SubhanAllah.
And then now you just really want to share it. Especially, alhamdulillah, how this turned out. I really want it to look professional. I want it to look like something that you could find in a store. Alhamdulillah, I think with all the effort that I put in, the editors put in, the designer, alhamdulillah, Osama put in, like, it is as close as possible to. Cause it even is past my expectations in a lot of ways.
It's so funny because you have your picture at the side.
Don't stop. Don't look at it. Don't look at it.
MashaAllah. Okay, Hashem, tell us about yourself. You know, who are you? What do you do? And then we'll get into what inspired you to write this book.
So my name is Hashem. I am a first-time author. I am somebody who's extremely passionate about climate change. I work in the space as a advocate, both in the activism side and in the corporate side. I have always had a passion for storytelling, and this is basically my introduction into the world of writing through trying to blend both my hopes for climates and storytelling.
Hey, when the last tree falls. Okay, speak to me about the title.
Yes.
What made you... Okay, first, did the title come about because of the book? As in, like, the way you wrote it, and then you thought... Or was the title the first thing you thought of?
You know, it's funny. The title wasn't the first thing I thought of. The first chapter, the first couple chapters were what I thought of first. Because it was based on a short story that I wrote when I was in creative writing class in university. And then I wrote the first couple of chapters of this book. And then there's this really good quote. It's actually it's in the front of the book that the story is based on, the title is based off. And it talks about, it's a native proverb from the indigenous people in Canada. And the quote goes basically, when the last tree falls, when the last river is polluted, or when the last air is polluted, and the last fish is like killed, only then will man realize that they cannot eat money.
I read that part.
Yeah, so that quote is essentially...
Then when you start saying it,
So, like, and I love the first part of that, when the last tree falls, because essentially... And in the book, you'll see like things like basically it's like a cascade of like actions, like things happen right when that happens. And I think when the native people were speaking that, it was actually in this thing called, it was like a hearing.
Yes.
So like back then when the Canadian government was trying to like populate an area, they were trying to build a pipeline, they're trying to do things, and they would sometimes do hearings for people to come and speak. And this was actually one of the recorded pieces from that hearing. And it was an indigenous person came and said these words in that hearing. And then it's been echoed across multiple forms and a lot of people. A lot of people attribute it to different people, but I think this is actually the most historically accurate way to attribute the quote.
First, I want to say one thing. I don't know about it. This book, I read to chapter 5.
Yes.
You know, me and my wife were reading it last night, and yes, when you gave it to us yesterday, we were just like on the train reading it, and we got to chapter 5, and then I remember she cried it a bit, and then I was like thinking, wow, like this is, I don't know about it, your writing is so surreal that you feel like
thank you,
you're there.
Yes.
And there was moments where I was like, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Like, I was really intertwined with the story. It felt like I was watching a movie in my head. That's how good and that's how surreal and that's how clear the direction of the writing was. And, you know, obviously as someone who's your friend and is very proud to have this, and design, by the way, is absolutely impeccable.
Shout out to Osama.
Allahumma barik to the person who designed this. Amazing. Also inside the book, the certain chapters, they have that little...
the watermarks.
The watermarks, it's
yeah.
amazing. But yeah, I wanted to... Obviously, there's no... You know, you said that you don't want the back of your book to have like a synopsis, but I want you to give us like a synopsis of the book. Like what are the readers expecting? What what is the story going to take them through, and stuff like that.
So I think the synopsis is always a very interesting conversation because I actually tell different versions of it depending on where I'm asked. But I think what I tell people now is that it's based off the story of a young man named Naeem.
Yes.
And his struggle to kind of find the balance in his life with all of the things that are happening around him, especially things related to climate, especially things related to family, things related to society. And this happens in a time period where the government doesn't exist anymore, obviously after the Civil War erupted. But because he lives in a remote village, he doesn't really see that. Yes. So his life is pretty much kind of smooth sailing, and then things start to get a bit hectic once the village sees that people are stealing trees from them at night. So that's the synopsis that I give people now. I try to give people, I really don't like telling people what happens and all the history behind it, because I really do want people to, like, as you guys are reading it, I get so happy just hearing people's first thoughts and reactions.
Because we didn't know what to expect. So like, it's almost like you're on a journey, but you don't know where you're going.
Yes.
But you just know that you're on a journey, and every little turn is like, it's different. So it's crazy, because I'm thinking, is this gonna happen next? Is what's gonna happen next? And then you're there, and you're with Naeem. And there's so many things you touched upon. For example, we talk about society. You know how like certain elders feel like young people can't contribute to your discussion, and certain things are changing now where people are saying, you know what, young people do have a voice. They do live in this world. They shouldn't be waiting until they get to a certain age to then be able to voice their opinion. When you were writing that, was there an overarching theme of you trying to change that narrative and showing his struggle, maybe through manhood and etc. like that?
Yeah, and I definitely was cognizant of that theme, and you'll find the theme grows in the book from start to the end. And there's a huge theme of like old versus young in the story, and that's actually emblematic of like the experiences I've had. And alhamdulillah, I've had so many great elders and great role models that have supported me in like being able to change what I wanted to change in community or in climate stuff. But really, a lot of times it's like you'll find the old guard is very hard to convince when it comes to these type of things, and you'll start to find that the concept of young versus old, of what it means to be a young man and grow into that role. And like it's kind of that constant battle of like you want responsibility, but are you ready for it? And like you're in such a rush to grow up, but everyone's like, nah, relax, like take your time, don't grow up yet. Like enjoy your young adulthood, like enjoy being a teenager, like. But everyone that's in that phase is always like, I need to grow, I need to become bigger, I need to become like somebody who can do all this.
Do we regret later on?
Later on, you think you're like, oh my God, I wish I could go back and do that. So that's one of the things.
The fact that you speak about that is wanting to grow very quickly, but at the same time, the elders telling you, hey, especially take your time, love the moment that you're in and stop rushing to the next destination. But obviously there's the counterpart of that, of like, okay, whilst I'm not rushing to grow old, also give me value whilst I'm young, and show me that, that not having a voice doesn't come with age. And that's the part where I feel like it really did, inspired me to think about, maybe younger generation, maybe younger self, and be like, what, maybe if he had a voice, maybe if he was given a bit more opinions and allowed to speak, then it would be different. But one thing I wanted to ask you was, what inspired you to write this book, and why was it important that you did it in Somalia, for example?
I think what inspired me first to write this book is because, as you know, I'm always trying to convince people to become more sustainable, to care more about the planet. And I felt that, like, stories are always the best way to communicate that to people. So part of my reasons, like, I've always wanted to tell people a story that says, listen, this isn't just a figment of your imagination. Like, I tell people all the time, and I say this always, like, even though this book is historical fiction, it's based off real events. This is people's realities. And I think people need to understand that when they read it, is like, to us this may be a fictional, but it's actually a true thing. So that's one of the things that really inspired me to write this book. The other element is that what inspired me to finally put it to paper was because when I went to Somalia, and I was always like trying to write bits and pieces of this, and I actually just saw areas that were like devastated with climate devastation, people were trying to survive. I saw the realities of it, and so I think for me a lot of the inspiration came from like, okay, there's a story to be told. And I've never, from my perspective, I never read a book that took place in Somalia that climate devastation was a core focus of it. Like, I've read other books, mashallah, Nuruddin, he's one of the best Somali authors, I know also Nadifa Muhammad's also a great author. There's a bunch of great Somali authors, but for me, I felt like, okay, what does Hashem bring to this conversation? And Hashem's super passionate about the environment, super passionate about climate change. So how can you put that lens together?
Also, you're from the diaspora, so you
That
have
too, the diaspora conversation.
You have the understanding of living here and wanting to go back home and to write a story about your homeland, and so that is quite inspiring. So it's the fact that you didn't do a Somali story in maybe in Canada or the UK, you did a Somali story in Somalia, and you showcased that, you know, their realities and their way of living. For example, the part that I really did like the touch of everyone in the community going for Fajr in the morning, and that being a stable part, and how you were saying like the houses were not so much different but so unique that everyone knew whose houses was. And I felt like, you know, we don't have that much community, maybe outside of the Western world. We don't really like look into community as much of Open Doors of Somalia, for example.
Yeah, community is always a fundamental part, and a lot of how I structured the scenes and the settings are based off like what my parents told me, and based on what my uncles told me, and based on what I saw, right? You'd be like, oh, Habrash's house has a yellow door. You know that, okay, Habrash's house is that door. Or the gate has like a blue gate or a green gate. Like everyone has like differentiating features. We're not like, it's not like in here where it's like everyone has the same cookie cutter house and same, you can't identify a house from another. So for me, that was really important. And I think the concept of community was like, that's actually based on a true story. Like the Jailani is based on my grandfather. And he actually used to do this. And I went to the street that in Hamar that he used to do this at. And he used to, every Fajr, he'd get people together and he'd say, here's some malawah, here's some anjero, here's some suqar, hala fristo, hala shekesto.
So cool.
And literally, you know who was describing this to me? Because I never met my grandfather, Allah yarhamhum. The people describing this to me were my uncles. And my uncles were like young Naeem. And they would go and they wouldn't solve issues, they would just go to eat food. So it was very interesting just hearing it from their perspective. So I was like, oh, I love the concept of youth being there in the conversation. So
that's amazing. So the next question is, because you speak about Naeem, and Naeem's obviously a young child. So I wanted to ask you, like, what aspect of your childhood growing up affected, like, the book?
Actually, I grew up, so funny enough, I grew up in Egypt. So for me, my childhood and Naeem's childhood are very much different. But I think parts of it that I felt like, a lot of authors do this, I try to make myself as different as possible from Naeem. Like what Naeem would do, I would do the opposite.
Really?
So I think it's a good technique. It's a good writing technique that I heard of in the beginning when I was starting to write. It was because sometimes you end up identifying yourself with too much with the main character. So then you're afraid to subject the main character to many things. And the best books we know, the main character goes through hell and back.
And we get angry at them.
And we get angry at them.
Because of the difference. We're like, oh man, why are you doing this? Because you've been doing something different.
Yeah. But not only that, but like, you put them through like loss, you put them through grief, you put them through like challenges, miscommunications, and you're like, But if you think about some of the best books, look at Harry Potter. Harry Potter is one of the most frustrating main characters I've ever seen. But people love that book.
One little sentence of him could have solved like majority of the movie.
Bro, you have how much money in the account? Like, and you're still feeding off the Weasleys? Like, I guess, but the point is like, Naeem and I actually are very different as people. So the main character in the book, the way he operates and the way I operate are very different. But my childhood was very much a lot of responsibility growing up, and a lot of the way I was entrusted with a lot of responsibility from my community members very early on. So that's why I see that part of Naeem.
Sorry to interrupt. Of you saying being opposite, Naeem is not entrusted with anything.
Yeah.
Is that one of the things you wanted him to actually, you know what?
Yep.
Not have any responsibilities and actually just grow?
I want him to be frustrated. I think what I had was very fortunate in that people saw things in me and wanted to trust me with it. But what if you don't get trusted? What if the community doesn't value you? You know, what if the community is just, listen, just be a kid. And constantly keeps telling you, be a kid.
Adulthood is hard.
And adulthood's hard. So I think, so part of that is the reason why I went the different way. But without spoiling it too much, Naeem does figure out, he has to strap up his boots at some point and figure out life.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of mahmais in here.
Yes.
In the book. There's a lot of sayings. Somali especially, we transfer information through metaphors.
Yes.
And storytelling and giving people perspective. What was your favorite mahmai in the book?
Yes.
And what's your favorite mahmai in general?
My favorite mahmai in general and in the book is actually on the back of the book. So if you look at the back of the book, I don't have a synopsis. Okay. But if you look at the back of the book, there's a mahmai there. You want to read it?
Nah, you read it.
So
I don't want to violate
it says, "Emrada waxay leedahay awood." لكن دخنك وحولي هاي حر.
Okay, explain that for us.
And this actually it actually comes up in the book later on.
Yeah.
And this is basically the saying that the climate itself has power, but tradition has rules.
Yes.
And in the sense that, like, if something happens in the climate, there's really nothing you can change. There's nothing you can do. Like, you are subject to what Allah creates. Like, if it rains, it rains. If it doesn't rain, it doesn't rain.
Yeah.
But then what humans have control over is traditions. And what's funny is because as tradition changed, then climate changed. And I think it was very interesting looking at it from the perspective, because I talked to my mom about this a lot. And she was like, this is actually a great reflection. She was like, part of our tradition before, trees were sacred. You know, people wouldn't over consume. People wouldn't overcut. People wouldn't over pollute. All of these things, people would just take what they needed. Even the nomadic lifestyle was very like minimalist. But part of that, that whole saying is mostly about looking at it from the perspective of like, our tradition had rules.
Yes.
Right, but we were ultimately still subject to the climate and its powers. But through changing our rules, we've actually been able to, make the climate even more powerful and more tyrannical, to the point where now we see constantly, in the region, like flooding and drought.
That's amazing that you say that.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties into the next thing, which is about tradition and stuff like that. So why was Jailani an important figure in your story, especially at the beginning? Why did you need him to build the world and stuff like that?
I feel like, without giving too much away, Jailani is a core figure in the beginning because you need somebody to be the core focal point of like what a society is, especially in the time periods. Like, if you listen to talk to people, like what happened after the Civil War? Like, did the society just collapse? No, like society still flourished. People.
So, do you remember when the Civil War happened? Was it the?
No, this is before we were born, right? So like.
But to give context to people, so that
to give context to people, so 1991, the war happened. Government collapsed. Essentially, Somalia turned into what people quote unquote claimed as a failed state. So, but what ended up happening is that people had to fend for themselves. People had to create kind of these like courts in different parts of the area to just kind of establish some level of stability, and it was an order. And a lot of people did it within their own capacity. A lot of people then combined it. People went to different courts. People went to different groups, to try to find justice. And some of it was working, and some of this didn't work. And I want to shed light on like what would happen in a small community that didn't have governance. So Jailani was kind of the sense of governance and structure that came to that city, into that village. So he was a core figure, and I think I knew his character before I even read the book. So for me, his character idea was very clear in my head.
Perfect. Well, because I think he's one of my favorite characters. I think he is somebody that I really look up to. Especially obviously the word Jailani being someone who's like a leader, like trusted, and the way you created his character, and you created him to be a gentle, kind man, and also someone who had great respect and great aura. He would use the word aura. And the way, like, so there was a scene where in the book where he's walking in the masjid and he's kindly, obviously he's not well, and then the way people just looked at him and just immediately the tension dissipated and people just waited for him to say something. I was like, that is such a great character. And talking about characters, what character was the most difficult to create?
Honestly, one of the most difficult characters to create was Ali.
Okay.
Because Ali, you're
he's
still, you're still early in the book, but Ali is very much a great antagonist. I think a story cannot be a good story without a good antagonist, and Ali is a good antagonist in my opinion.
One point that you said, sorry. Every time I kept spitting, I kept getting angry.
It's a very good, subhanAllah.
I said, what's he doing?
Yeah, sometimes you need a good character and a good tell. Like sometimes you can hear the character before you see them. You see somebody spitting, you're like, oh, Ali's back. Or like, I think sometimes just degrading behavior. And Ali's actually also based off a lot of characters that I've seen in my life. Like sometimes people are just ops. You gotta write them as ops. So
if you're a main character, you have to have somebody that's trying to take you down.
Yeah.
So talk about, obviously, this is your first book. This is your first novel. So what was the writing process like? Is there anything you wish you have done differently?
I think I fell in love with the writing process. It was the most difficult thing I've ever done. I would say that when it comes to writing this book.
I agree.
And as you've written the book yourself, like we joke about how frustrating it is to sit down every day, write 1,000 words, write 100 words, like come back and be like, oh, this is terrible, erase it all, do it again. It's so funny, but I think for me, this process was like a learning experience, and I'm so excited to write whatever I write next because now I have all the learnings.
Yeah.
I know how I want to structure. I know how I like want a character. Like even right now, this book is printed. It's in your hand. But I wish I could go back and just edit like a big section of it. Do this more, do that more. But again, alhamdulillah, you have to be content with what you put out.
You have to not only be content with what you put out, but understand nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
And everything could be iterated. Everything could be changed. Everything could be, a sentence could be, can this be done differently? And I think the difference between mine and yours is that with mine is a bit more like essays.
Yes.
But with yours is a story, and with the story you have to build a world. You have to make the reader connect with that person.
Yeah.
Then you have to kind of like break down that world and then rebuild it for the character again. And you have to create tension and stuff like that. So that must have been very difficult for you to like go through, because we are reading everything from start to the end.
Yeah.
But obviously you didn't know where the story was going to end at times. You may have changed where something was going
I
at times.
didn't at all.
You
I think
didn't?
in the first, this book is part by part. It's 4 parts, right?
Okay.
Each act, I only knew how the act would end. I didn't know what the next act was.
So that's the part I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Where you did one part, you're like, okay, now what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
You must have been so excited for yourself because you're using your own imagination.
Yes.
And you're creating this world that's only yours, but you're sharing it with everyone else. So how was it like now seeing it and now people are reading it and they're telling you, hey, I like this part, or maybe you should have flushed this part out a little bit more. What was that like?
I think one part of the writing process that I really liked was getting my beta readers to read it. So like I had 4 really great readers who read this book before anyone else, before it was even in print form. They read it on PDF. And the funniest thing was they were one of the first people to read it from start to finish. That wasn't myself. And they all gave different parts that they were their favorite. Some people were like, I like this part and I hated this part. Somebody would come back and do the exact opposite. I hated this part, I love this part.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, this is a good sign. A good sign is like if your beta readers can agree on what they like and dislike,
Yes.
because there's different elements that you can take from each of them.
Yes,
Which
yes.
goes to show you, like for me, I had a lot of excitement. Like, and you'll find that at the end of each part, it's almost like a story.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like you could technically stop at a different part, but like you want to keep going.
Yes,
You
yes.
want to see what happens to the characters next. And as you become more familiar, you care about the characters more, you want to see the characters more. It just becomes more and more of a thing. So I really enjoyed that process of writing it part by part. I don't know if
It feels like a mini story within a mini story.
Exactly. But
Like chapter 1, it relates to chapter 2, but if I read chapter 1 and left at chapter 1, I feel like I would have a great story.
yeah.
And then it continues like that. So I did really enjoy that. That I was like, there was not an overarching theme of like you're dropping the ball all the time or create like cliffhangers. They weren't cliffhangers. I just really enjoyed like being able to sit and not have anxiety about I need to get to the next part immediately.
Wait till you read the next chapter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll say that. I think I that's essentially part of a writing technique. It's
Yes.
a lot of writing techniques that I learned and I researched were about like how each chapter almost has to be like a book. It has to have conflict. It has to have resolution. It has to have suspense. And once you do that, the books become really cool to read because then every chapter feels fulfilling. And because my chapters are a bit longer than the typical chapters, you actually want to make people feel like, okay, I want to finish this chapter before I go to sleep today.
Perfect. Talking about chapters, talking about writing. No spoilers.
Yeah.
But will there be a sequel, or is where the last tree falls ends? Will there be the first tree grows?
No. Yes, that sounds too cliche. I think, it's funny. I'll never say never, but I think I generally like having finality to a lot of books, and I think I love having new starts. But there are stories in this that I would love to explore. Like, so it may not necessarily be a direct sequel, but it may be a related story. But I feel like I love this period of time in Somalia where things are just like not really hashed out. People don't know what's happening directly. So I do love the element of telling stories through that area, but who knows? Like I left this door open. The book itself is you could finish it and not write another book, but there are also other stories that you can explore and make a whole new book out of it. But for me, I'm just excited to write the next one, whether it's this one or the next one. But once I'm done this book launch event, April 20th, if you haven't got your tickets yet,
April 20th.
Then after that, I'm gonna start breathing and looking into what I want to do next, inshallah.
Because other versions of the book could be like somebody who maybe lives in the West and experiencing the other form of climate change and seeing maybe going from like a village, like Naeem maybe could move countries and maybe goes from a small village and starts to live into a bustling city like London or like Toronto and then he's thinking, what the hell's going on here? What's all these things?
It's a good suggestion. You should finish the book first. Then you can give me your...
no, I won't finish it, but we'll see, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And moving to the next question. Have you always been passionate about bringing awareness to climate issues, and when did it start for you?
Yeah, I think I wasn't always. I think I started off when I started working in it after university, and when I was in university, I started working on it, and I became more passionate in that sense. But then actually what made me frustrated was like how little people cared. Like I think view a coin, like climate change technically is the challenge of our generation. You know, our generation, if you ask them like what is the defining issue of your time, climate change is probably our defining challenge. Like depending on how we perform on this, we can really like either make the world super habitable after us or not pretty habitable. And for me, this became like a really good call to action because I love purposefulness and I love being purposeful in my actions.
Yes.
And being purposeful in my work was a way to be like, okay, let me be purposeful in my climate action. Same way, you know, as somebody who, you know, working in relationships, working in people in that space, like, so for that whole area becomes more and more, you know, you're more driven.
Yeah.
And for me, the climate space makes me driven because I'm always trying to push solutions, try to fix, and that's why, you know, started like help with, you know, with some of my friends, like starting Somali sustainability, because really we just were frustrated by people, so trying to get people to change, and make, you know, positive impacts in their lives was in the diaspora and in back home was always a growing challenge. So that's why I cared about.
No, I think you're very inspirational. You're a motivating character, and I think in a day and age where we consume social media and we lack purpose and we lack direction, to see somebody be passionate about something, and not only be passionate about it in the sense of like to keep it to themselves, but to also educate other people and to also make a difference in the world, is very inspiring, and it's very, you know, wholesome as to see from my perspective, and also for the younger generation, for somebody to see, you know, oh my God, like this person's really making movements in this place and is really making a difference and educating people. I think it's very, very inspiring, but also heavy work. And may Allah make it easy for you.
I mean, for both
may
of
this
us.
book, you know, be the first thing that sparks a little bit of kindness, and also for me to actually look in and say, you know, what difference can I make, and how have I been behaving with nature, and, you know, with consumption, with especially overconsumptions, and just making better choices with what we spend our money on or what we do on our day-to-day lives. So it is amazing. And to make it, was it difficult to seamlessly like bring awareness to deforestation whilst incorporating the story aspect?
Yes, I think you know, one of the things that I grappled with a lot is like, how can you, because I told you the story was actually based on a short story I wrote. How could you tell somebody who's starving, who doesn't have means, who doesn't have economic security, hey, don't cut this tree in your backyard. Hey, don't cut this forest down. Don't do this, don't do that. Because at the end of the day, these people are starving. These people don't have means, right? That's not the case in the book. But, I mean, like, in reality, I find it challenging sometimes to try to talk to people about, like, hey, like, we should find different ways to be. We should find different ways to, you know, bring sustainable, like, solutions. But a lot of times, like, you know, people's primary need is what? Like, security, financial stability, like having a livelihood.
Greed as well.
And greed is a big part of it, right? So I think, yeah, I struggled with it, but I think for the story's sake, there's always different stances to it. Like whether you're the person who's cutting it, whether you're the person shipping it, whether you're the person consuming it, everybody has a story in this to play. And I think what I wanted to highlight was actually the people whose story weren't told. Like what happens to people that lived beside that tree that you cut down, and what happens to their lives after that process. So that's really what I wanted to highlight.
Okay, and in terms of the book, what was the feeling you experienced when the book was completely finished? I'm talking about you've written it. I'm talking about
dopamine.
I'm talking about like you think there's nothing more I can do to this. There's nothing more I can take out of it. I'm done. What was that feeling like?
Oof, well, that's a good question. I think that time, I remember I was sitting in the library. I was sitting and I clicked the last word and I was just like, Alhamdulillah. Because for me, it was like, I told you I didn't know how it was going to end.
Yeah.
But once I ended it, I was like, Alhamdulillah that I got to this point. I didn't really put too much mind into what came next, which is like the marketing, the agents, the publishing, all that jazz. But really just finishing it to the completion point for me was cathartic, because it was like you spend so much time. There's a lot of self-doubt. You don't know if you're gonna get there. You don't know if people are gonna read it. You don't even know if it's in a good story, right? In your head, you're like, oh, this is fire. There's some parts you're like, oh, this is not that good, but you keep going. You keep iterating. And once I got to that point, I was just so happy and proud of myself from getting to that point, that I was just so excited to share it. Now I was just like, okay, guys, it's like when when a kid, when you only finish a really good painting or drawing, you're like, oh, look.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt. But again, the whole concept of running a book is, for me, was mammoth task. Like I before I moved to London, I didn't know any authors like firsthand. Like I could not like tell you and say, hey, I met a person who wrote a novel from start to finish. So that was interesting. So this was all part of my process.
Okay, I think I had that same feeling. I can't lie to you. When I did the last page and I just said, I don't want to look at it.
I don't want to look at it.
I don't want to look at it. I just think I left it for like a week or two before I even read another thing of it, before I even went to go edit it or to go send it to other people. I just said, I don't want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But the journey, the blank page, from the blank page to like 100k plus words or however much, you just think to yourself, wow, like the development, the hours that you sat down, the times that you thought to yourself, is this even worth it?
Many times.
Am I even good enough to be writing this? And would people even read it? And then you ask yourself, like, if not me, then who? And then you ask yourself, and there's a quote by Toni Morrison where she said, if there's a book you want to read and it doesn't exist, you write it.
100%.
So that process of creating something, that process of manifesting your work into the world, it is cathartic. It is very, it's bringing love being made word, basically.
100%.
And I'm honestly very proud of the fact that you've done this, and
Alhamdulillah.
And also being a diaspora Somali who's here, you're Somali boy as well.
Big ups.
You know what I'm saying? So it's really nice to see our people succeed and our people create something to leave as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the next bit could be like if you could tell someone who's dreams of publishing a book, or whether it be a novel or a guide, what is one thing you'll tell them?
I would tell them, find good friends and find people who believe in you, and don't rely on those people, because like even this book, I finished it, and at one point I was actually debating on putting it away, but really it was my friends and the people around me that were like, hell no, you're gonna put this out, people are gonna see it, and we're gonna love it. And even times where I was like, and my friends sometimes I'd be like, okay, it's like I can't go out, I have to go write, and they'd be like, yeah, go write. And they'd be like, and one more time sometimes I'd meet people and they'd be like, where you at in the story, how's the story going? And sometimes I'd say, oh, I'm at this really quick, and they keep them accountable. So bro, I can't tell you how important a support network is for accountability. And even if you don't find it, bro, post online. I'm telling you, so many people are like you that just they have, after writing, now people come up to me like, oh, I've always had this idea in my head. I'm like, write it. And then I was like, tell me the idea, and they tell me the idea. I'm like, that's such a cool idea. I wish I could write that, but like I can't. It's your idea, write it. And subhanAllah, that just becomes more and more of a reality. So my business advice would be like, find the right people, find a support network. If you don't find a support network, make one.
You as you were talking, you said that your wife was there in that journey, supporting you, and giving you prompts and encouragement. And so there's a lot of things that worked in your favor, and
Alhamdulillah,
you used that Allah blessed you with. But it is very important to have encouragement. It is very important to have a group of people that tell you, go at it. You know what I'm saying?
Or you could be like, I do have go on TikTok and and basically tell the world the process and go through it. Like, you had like 20,000 supporters.
No, alhamdulillah. For me, the thing was, I like to document things.
Yes.
I like to talk about them, and because I talk about them, people hold me accountable. Like before I even finished my book, I remember I think I was on live one day, and I was talking about something else. Someone said, "Well, let's not talk about that. Where's your book? Where's your book? I'm waiting, my guy. Where's your book?"
I love that.
It's also, I like to show people, hey, there's nothing special about this, like authors and like these people that have done things. People think it's so far away from them.
So yeah.
And I always tell them, it's a habit. A writer is a writer because they've written. And they've got into that habit of writing, and one day they've created something that was long enough for them to publish.
Yeah.
And so don't think of yourself, some people just feel like you have to be eccentric or powerful or very knowledgeable to get something done. I always tell them, like, give yourself the opportunity to try, and give yourself the opportunity for you to just exist without comparing yourself to other people or without thinking that other people have something that you don't, and therefore you can't get to that place. And it's very important.
Beautifully said. Comparison is always the thief of joy.
Beautiful, beautiful. What do you want to achieve with the book? What's the biggest takeaway?
Compassion, empathy. Like, as you're reading it right now, I'm sure you're feeling those feelings, you know?
I'm in love with those trees.
Yeah, you love those trees. But I think the key thing really is just, like, people are so detached from what's going on that there is almost, like, this dissociative responsibility. Like, they think because we're diaspora, we have no accountability back home. Because we're buying whatever we buy here, we're supporting whatever we support here, we have no accountability back home. But you have accountability wherever you are. Climate change is a global phenomenon. Wherever we are, wherever we're polluting, wherever we're making, wherever we're consuming, the world is a global ecosystem. Things change because of people, not because. And Allah actually says in the Quran, like, you know, people have faceted aid the nas. Like, people's hands are what's going to cause the earth to be corrupted. So, I think, hopefully, people can see actually there's a long-term ramifications of what you're doing, and you have to slowly improve yourself. And hopefully, this book even sparks that empathy or that compassion within you to start your sustainability journey, or, you know, just being more careful and more mindful.
Perfect. Well, I think the part is, even though we're individual, we're collective.
Always.
And the same with the mirror effect, and the same with the domino effect. What you cause has other effects and the consequences of it.
Right.
So it's people want to divorce themselves from the reality of you know, maybe consuming something, or they think to themselves, oh, you know, I only bought it, but then you're one of like 1,000 or 1,000,000. So it is a collective thing. And in the book, there's a subtle romance. And, you know, as a love boy myself,
yeah, I get it.
How difficult was it for you to portray that, and in a lens of, like, you know, as a man, but also Islamically, and also like just a Somali, you know, culture? How difficult was writing that aspect of the story?
You know, romance is always hard to write as a guy, and I think there's proven cases where a lot of guys suck at writing romance. But I think for me, I didn't want to say the words, I wanted to show it. So you'll see that in the story, the main love interests, the way they talk and the way they express their care to each other is very, like, action-based. They spend more time with each other. They console each other. They ask each other how things are going. And I think that's really what I wanted people to see for that variation. But I also struggled with it because at the end of the day, you're like, obviously you can't do like all that. The things that other authors write, right? You can't show crazy stuff going on in the book, because it's also back in the Somali. So I had to actually ask a lot of my parents, like how it is, like, you know, asking like older people, like, you know, how was it? How did you guys get to know each other? And actually, there is a level of courtship that happened back in the day, and it was a respectful Islamic environment where people knew of you and you know of each other, and it was kind of known that you guys were, you know, to be wed and distant, and there were still like respectful boundaries there. So I think writing that just allowed me to open my eyes to like a whole new system that people used to use, and like I'm sure you see it now. Like, bro, just having a relationship doesn't mean you're gonna like do the absolute crazy stuff. But I think that whole process for me was really trying to write it in a way that was authentic and not just make up random stuff. So that the love story between the two characters, you know, inshallah, hopefully people enjoy it, because by the end of it I was like, okay, I'm happy with where this is at. Obviously I felt like there's obviously things I could add, but alhamdulillah, I'm content with how I wrote it. It wasn't easy, but I tried.
And yeah, that's fine. And the last
question
to end it, how proud are you of yourself for writing this and
Alhamdulillah,
creating something that, you know, is yours, and you're a little world now, you have your little place?
Yeah, I think alhamdulillah, like I think Allah's the one who gives people the opportunity and the ability to do these things, and I would never be who I am without my support and the people around me. Like, this idea has been brewing for a long time, and honestly, the amount of support I've been getting has genuinely made me so proud of my community and the people around me. So honestly, I'm more proud of the people around me. I'm proud of myself, alhamdulillah, for doing this mountain, conquering this mountain, getting to the top of the hill. But really, really, truly, like, the response and the support from my family, my friends, everyone around the world that's been like supporting this book when it's not even out yet, has been truly, truly like inspiring. So alhamdulillah, like kulli hal, and these people haven't even read the book yet. So inshallah, once they read the book, that they get even more happy that it's something that they enjoyed and actually learned something from. So even if just 10 people read it, 5 people read it, alhamdulillah, I'm content with now that the story is out there. That is the goal. You do it for the love of telling the story and changing people's perspectives, not to become a bestseller,
Yeah.
not to make the most money, because really you don't make a lot of money from this type of stuff. But alhamdulillah, it is an enjoyable process, and I'm very proud that I, alhamdulillah, can start introducing myself, or try to at least introduce myself as,
Hashem
hey,
the
my name is
author.
Hashem, and I'm an author.
MashaAllah. And for the last bit of the video, when is your book launch?
The book launch is April 20th in London. Make sure you guys come out. Everyone gets a signed copy of the book. There's going to be Shah, Malawah, Bukhur, a little Somali, playlist going on. Things, alhamdulillah, I think should be fun. Should be a good chill time. And we're also going to have climate presentations. So there's going to be people who are going to be showing old historical artifacts and stuff like that. So should not, for people that are in London, if you're here on Sunday, if you're not doing anything, this is the place to be. So inshallah.
No, even if you do something,
Even if you got something to do, make sure you come out,
fair,
inshallah.
fair. Thank you for this interview and for giving me the opportunity, and obviously also the book as well is amazing. I mean, Allah bless it for you.
Ameen.
And yeah, thank you guys.
Assalamu alaikum.